I was on my back on the old couch in the den, the door half open, so the hallway light cut a thin line across the carpet. His weight pressed down on me, breath hot and ragged, against my ear, as he pushed in deeper, slow and steady, making the couch creak under us. I whispered, "Stop," my voice breaking, but my arms stayed pinned tight to my sides, hands gripping the cushions, like I was afraid I'd pull him closer if I moved. His hand slid under my shirt, calloused fingers rough on my stomach. The smell of sweat and faint engine oil clung to him. My legs trembled as they wrapped around his waist, even though my mind screamed at me to shove him off. I stared up at the ceiling, paint cracked and yellowing from years of missed touch-ups. I focused on that crack while he moved, breathing into my neck, whispering things I couldn't bring myself to hear. His belt buckle pressed into the soft skin of my thigh, the leather cold and rough. I hated the sound my own body made, the way I gasped and whimpered, the way my hips bucked up into his without me telling them to. He was my father's friend. He'd been in this house so many times, I lost count. Holidays, birthdays, random evenings, when he'd drop by with beer or a box of old tools for my husband. He'd watched me grow up, called me kiddo at family picnics, ruffled my hair when I was 12, and blushed too easily. I never imagined I'd cross this line. I'm 39, married, 2 kids asleep upstairs, while I lay here whispering stop with my mouth and yes with my body. I didn't think I was the kind of woman who could do this, who would let a man press into her while the world around us stayed oblivious and quiet. He shifted his weight, grabbing my wrists, pinning them above my head so hard I felt the blood rush out of my hands. His breath came faster, his chest pressing me into the cushions, every thrust making the old frame squeak louder. I wanted to cry out, to scream, to tell him to stop, but the words stuck in my throat like glass. What would you do if the one person you were supposed to trust, the one you were supposed to keep at arm's length, was the one you ended up craving in secret? I could hear the soft tick of the hallway clock, the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Normal sounds. Familiar. But nothing felt normal in that moment. He grunted into my neck teeth, scraping my skin as he moved harder, faster. The guilt twisted in my gut, sharp and bright. But I couldn't look away from the shadow of us moving on the far wall, couldn't pretend I didn't want him so badly. It made my bones ache. When he finished, he stayed on top of me, breathing hard, forehead resting against my collarbone. I didn't move. I couldn't. I felt like if I did, everything I'd built would collapse around me. "I shouldn't have come," he muttered, voice thick. "You shouldn't have," I whispered back, even though my legs were still locked around him, even though part of me wanted him to start again. His hand slid off my wrists, drifting down to my hip, squeezing once before he pushed himself up and off me. I felt the cold air rush in, making me shiver. He didn't look at me as he buckled his belt, wiping sweat from his face with the back of his hand. If you've ever lived with a secret that made you ache and burn at the same time, this story might speak to you more than you'd like. Please comment and subscribe. The more you watch, the more stories like this will find others holding back the same truth. Let's begin. I woke before the sun sitting in the kitchen, with my hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink. The sky outside was just beginning to lighten, soft gray washing over the backyard fence. The quiet felt too heavy, pressing into my chest like a weight I couldn't lift. My husband came in around 6, dressed for work, hair damp from his shower. He kissed the top of my head, asked if I was okay. I said yes, even though my stomach twisted, just hearing his voice. I didn't sleep much the night before. I kept thinking about that couch, about the feel of another man's breath against my ear, the scrape of his belt buckle against my thigh, the way his weight pinned me down, while I whispered stop with my mouth and begged him not to with my body. I burned the memory into my brain, even though it made me sick with guilt. After he left for work, I stood by the sink staring out the window. The kids' cereal bowls still sat on the counter, soggy and forgotten. The laundry buzzer went off in the hallway, but I couldn't make myself move. The house felt too big and too empty at the same time. Around noon, my father called. He needed help cleaning out his shed old boxes, leftover wood from half-finished projects. I drove over, arms pressed tight to my sides the whole way, rehearsing what I would say if he asked me why I looked tired. But he didn't. He was waiting in the driveway, grinning, waving me over. And there, standing behind him, hammer tucked into the loop of his jeans, was the man, my father's friend. My breath caught in my throat when he turned and saw me. His eyes flicked down my body before meeting my gaze again, his mouth tightening into a thin line. "Hey, kiddo," he said the same way he always did. But there was something different in his voice, something rougher. I kept my face blank, forcing a small smile. "Hey." We spent the afternoon pulling boxes out of the shed. I felt his eyes on me every time I bent to lift something, every time I reached past him for a piece of wood. My father didn't notice. He kept talking about the neighbor's dog, about the weather, about how he should have done this months ago. I felt like I was going to vomit. At one point, my father went inside to answer the phone. The man leaned in close behind me, his breath brushing my ear. "I keep thinking about you," he whispered, voice low. I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to lean back into him. "Don't," I whispered. "You didn't stop me," he said. I swallowed hard, jaw clenched. "I hate you." "Liar," he murmured, stepping back as my father came out the door again. I turned away, staring at the boxes, trying to calm the shaking in my hands. My father laughed about something I didn't hear. The man smiled at me over his shoulder, and I felt my stomach drop. I was supposed to protect this family. I was supposed to be better than this. But every second he was near, I felt myself falling apart. Later, we sat around my father's old kitchen table, drinking sweet tea, while he sorted receipts into piles. The man sat across from me, his knee brushing mine under the table, his thumb tracing slow circles on my shin where no one could see. I kept my arms pressed tight to my sides, my jaw locked, trying to focus on the numbers my father was muttering. But every touch felt like fire under my skin. At one point, my father stood up to answer the door. I shot out of my chair, stepping away from the table. He caught my wrist as I passed. "You can't run forever," he whispered, eyes locked on mine. "I can try." I breathed, yanking my arm away, nearly knocking over a stack of papers. My father came back in, scolding me lightly for making a mess. I mumbled an apology, bending to pick up the fallen sheets, feeling the man's eyes burning into my back the whole time. When I finally left, my father hugged me at the door, telling me he'd call soon. The man walked me out to my car silent. The air between us crackled thick with something I couldn't let myself name. "Don't come by," I said, my voice shaking. "You don't want that," he said close enough. I could feel the heat of him, smell the faint trace of sawdust and sweat on his shirt. I didn't answer. I just got in the car, shut the door, and drove away without looking back. But the whole way home, my hands trembled on the wheel, my body aching in places I couldn't ignore. I tried to avoid him. I didn't answer his texts. I pretended I was busy when my father called, asking me to stop by the house. I told myself that if I just stayed away long enough, the guilt would fade, and I could go back to being the woman I was before. But every night, lying in bed beside my husband, I thought about the way he'd looked at me in my father's kitchen, the heat in his eyes, the rough scrape of his thumb across my skin, the way he'd whispered, "You didn't stop me." I hated myself for how much I wanted to hear that voice again. One afternoon, I was driving home from the grocery store when I saw his truck parked on the side of the road near the edge of town. My hands tightened on the wheel. I told myself not to slow down, not to look. But my foot eased off the gas anyway, eyes flicking over to the cab of the truck. He was sitting there, window rolled down, arm resting on the door. He looked at me as I passed his mouth, twitching into something that wasn't quite a smile. My chest went tight, my stomach twisting into knots. That night he texted me. "I miss you," he wrote. I threw the phone onto the couch, pressing my hands to my face, rocking back and forth like that could chase away the heat building in my belly. My husband came home late, kissed me on the forehead, asked if I was okay. I nodded, smiling weakly, arms pressed tight to my sides. When he went to bed, I stayed on the couch, staring at my phone in the dark. The screen lit up again. "I know you think about it," he wrote. "I know you want it again." I whispered no under my breath, but my thumb hovered over the reply button. Outside, a truck rumbled down the street. I nearly jumped off the couch, heart pounding, part of me hoping it was him pulling into the driveway. I hated myself for it. The next day I went to my father's house. He needed help moving old furniture out of the garage. The man was there waiting. My breath caught in my throat the second I saw him sweat, shining on his neck, the old t-shirt stretched across his broad shoulders. "Hey, kiddo," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. I swallowed hard, avoiding his eyes. "Don't," I whispered when my father stepped away. "You didn't say no," he murmured, voice low. My hands trembled as I picked up a box, moving it past him. He brushed against me on purpose, his hand sliding along my hip, sending a shiver up my spine. I should have slapped him. I should have screamed, but I didn't. I kept moving. Boxes, kept pretending I was strong enough to ignore the way my body burned every time he came near. Later that afternoon, when my father went inside to take a call, he cornered me near the workbench. His hands didn't touch me at first. He just leaned in close, his breath hot against my ear. "You're going to break," he murmured. "You want me so bad it hurts." "Shut up," I whispered, pushing him back. He caught my wrist, holding it tight enough to make me wince. "Say you don't want me," he breathed. I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. He let me go, stepping back, eyes dark. "That's what I thought," he said. I ran inside, hands shaking, telling my father I had to leave early. He frowned, asking if I was okay. I lied like I always did, and bolted out the door. In the car, I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles went white, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked pale, wild-eyed, like a woman I didn't recognize. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed while my husband slept, arms wrapped around myself, whispering over and over that I didn't want him, that I wouldn't let this happen again. But the truth was, part of me already knew it would. It was past midnight when I heard his truck pull into the driveway, the low rumble cutting through the pounding rain. I stood in the kitchen, hands braced on the counter, telling myself over and over not to move, not to open the door. But I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could feel was the sick hot ache low in my belly, the one I hated and needed at the same time. The back door creaked open. I didn't look. I felt the cold draft roll across the floor, smelled the rain and wet dirt clinging to his clothes. "I shouldn't be here," he said, voice hoarse, breathless. "You need to leave," I whispered, but my body didn't move. He stepped closer, boots squelching on the tile until I felt the heat of him at my back. "You don't want that," he murmured, his hands sliding around my waist, fingers digging into my hips. I shivered, pressing my arms tight to my sides. "Stop," I whispered, but it came out like a plea, weak and broken. "You don't mean it." He breathed into my ear, lips brushing the skin, sending a shiver down my spine. I hated him. I hated myself more. He turned me around, pinning me against the counter, kissing me so hard my teeth knocked together. I tasted blood where his lips split mine, the copper tang hot and bitter. My hands stayed trapped between us, fingers curled into fists, as he fumbled with the button on my jeans. "I can't stop," he groaned, voice thick. "Please," I whispered, tears spilling down my cheeks. I didn't know what I was begging for him to stop, or for him to keep going, until I couldn't feel the guilt anymore. He yanked my jeans down, pushing me back onto the counter, my back arching as he shoved my legs apart. The edge of the cold tile bit into my spine. When he pushed in, I choked on a cry, my hands scrambling at the countertop, looking for something to hold on to. His hips rocked into me slow at first, then harder each thrust, rattling the dishes in the drying rack beside us. "You're mine," he growled, breath hot on my neck. "No," I whispered, but my thighs clenched around him, my body betraying every word. The rain pounded the roof, thunder shaking the windows. I heard the whimper catch in my throat, felt the tears running down my temples, into my hairline. He grabbed my wrists, pinning them against my sides, pushing in deeper until my breath hitched. "Look at me," he ordered, voice low and rough. I opened my eyes, met his stare. He looked hungry, desperate, the same guilt and need mirrored in his dark gaze. "I hate you," I gasped, but the words meant nothing. I know he breathed, pushing harder, his jaw tight, sweat dripping from his temple onto my cheek. When he finally finished, he stayed there, panting, forehead pressed against mine. The rain still hammered the roof, the kitchen smelling like wet clothes and sweat, and something darker, something raw and ugly. He pulled out, stepping back, hands trembling as he fastened his jeans. "I shouldn't have come," he muttered, voice cracking. I didn't answer. He turned and left without looking back, the door slamming shut behind him. I slid off the counter, pulling my jeans up with shaking hands, stumbling to the sink. I turned on the water, scrubbing at my arms, my neck, my chest, but I couldn't get his touch off me. I stayed there for what felt like hours, the water running over my raw skin, my arms pressed tight to my sides, rocking back and forth, whispering over and over that I wouldn't let it happen again. But I already knew I would. I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay on my side with my arms pressed tight against my body, listening to the house creak and settle in the dark, the faint ticking of the hallway clock drilling into my head. I kept waiting for the sound of his truck, the soft rumble of his engine that would tell me he hadn't really left. But he didn't come back. When the sun finally started to rise, I dragged myself out of bed, moving slow and careful, so I wouldn't wake my husband. He murmured something in his sleep, rolling over, pulling the blanket around his shoulders like a shield. I stared at him for a long time, guilt curdling in my stomach. I wanted to reach out and touch his face, to remember what it felt like to love him without any lies between us, but my hands stayed at my sides. I went downstairs and made coffee standing at the kitchen window while the machine gurgled behind me. The backyard was gray and soggy from the rain, the grass flattened and muddy. I saw the place by the fence where we used to set up the kiddie pool in the summer, where my kids splashed and laughed until the sun went down. I felt like I was looking at someone else's life. I didn't touch the coffee. I poured it into my favorite mug, just like I did every morning, but I couldn't bring myself to drink it. When the kids woke up, I went through the motions, packing their lunches, tying shoes, smoothing hair back with shaking hands. My daughter asked if I was sick because I looked pale. I forced a smile and told her I was fine, that I just didn't sleep well. After they left the house, went silent again. I wandered from room to room, picking up toys, folding throw blankets, wiping down countertops that were already clean. My phone buzzed on the counter, but I didn't look at it. I already knew who it was. I went into the laundry room and sat on the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. I could smell the clean sheets in the dryer, feel the hum of it vibrating through the floor. But I felt dirty all over, like the smell of him was still on my skin, no matter how many times I scrubbed it away. My phone buzzed again. "I need to see you," the message said. I threw the phone against the wall, watching the screen crack, the soft pop of glass, breaking, echoing in the small room. I buried my face in my hands, rocking back and forth, whispering over and over that I hated him, that I hated myself more. But the truth was, I wanted him so bad, it felt like I was being eaten alive from the inside. That afternoon, I forced myself to go out. I walked through the grocery store like a ghost, barely seeing the shelves, barely hearing the cheerful music playing over the speakers. I saw him in the produce section, leaning against a stack of boxes, eyes locked on me. My breath caught. I almost turned and ran, but I made myself keep walking, pretending he wasn't there. He stepped in front of my cart, blocking my path. "You can't keep ignoring me," he said, voice low, rough. "Get out of my way," I whispered, not looking at him. "You don't want me gone," he said, his hand brushing mine on the cart handle, sending a jolt through my body. I yanked my hand back, eyes stinging with tears. "I hate you," I whispered. He smiled, small and sad. "You're a terrible liar," he murmured. I pushed past him, leaving the cart in the middle of the aisle, nearly running out of the store. In the car, I slammed the door shut, hands shaking so bad I could barely get the key in the ignition. I drove home with my chest-tight breath, coming in shallow gasps. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear my hair out, to rip my own skin off just to get rid of the way he made me feel. That night, I cooked dinner for my family, moving like a machine, chopping vegetables, stirring the pot, setting the table. My husband came home late, kissed me on the cheek, told me he missed me. I nodded, smiling, my hands trembling so bad I nearly dropped the serving spoon. After dinner, I cleaned the kitchen while he helped the kids with their homework. I could hear them laughing in the living room, their small voices rising and falling like music. I wanted to be part of it, but I couldn't move. I stood at the sink, scrubbing the same dish over and over until my hands went numb. Later, when everyone was asleep, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to my husband's steady breathing beside me. I don't know if I want to stop, or if I just want to stop hating myself for not. The next evening, we were sitting at the dinner table when my husband looked at me over his glass of water, eyes narrowed just slightly. "You've been different lately," he said, voice low so the kids wouldn't hear. I felt the blood drain from my face. I forced a smile, shaking my head. "I'm fine," I said, but my voice cracked halfway through. He didn't look convinced. After dinner, while the kids played in the living room, he followed me into the kitchen. I was scrubbing the same plate over and over, the water running so hot it turned my skin pink. "Talk to me," he said, setting his hand on my back. I froze. "I'm fine," I whispered. "You're lying," he said, voice harder now. "Tell me what's wrong." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My throat closed up, the words choking me from the inside. "I can't help you if you don't let me in," he said, sighing, stepping back. "I don't need help," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the running water. That night, after we put the kids to bed, I lay next to him in the dark, my eyes open, staring at the faint glow of the alarm clock on the dresser. Every breath felt like it scraped my ribs raw. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I didn't want to look, but my hand moved on its own, picking it up the screen, lighting my face in the dark. "I miss you," the message read. I swallowed hard. "Don't come here," I wrote back. "Liar," he replied a moment later. I turned off the phone, shoving it under the pillow, but I couldn't stop thinking about him, about the way he made me feel, wanted seen alive, about the way he pushed me so deep I couldn't breathe and didn't want to. I heard the front door creak an hour later, my body tensed, breath catching in my throat. I lay perfectly still, my arms pressed tight against my sides, praying he wouldn't come up the stairs, praying he would. But it was just my husband checking on the kids, shutting off the hallway light. The next morning he asked me again at breakfast if I was okay. The kids were arguing about cereal, my son spilling milk across the table, my daughter shrieking about her homework. I felt like I was watching it all from underwater, disconnected, untouchable. "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a smile as I wiped up the spilled milk. I spent the day cleaning the house, scrubbing the bathroom, until my hands bled from the harsh cleaner, vacuuming the carpets over and over until the vacuum bag was full. I kept hoping the noise would drown out the thoughts in my head, the phantom feeling of his hands on my hips, the sound of his voice in my ear. It didn't. That night I stood by the living room window while my husband snored upstairs, staring out into the dark street. Every car that passed made my heart jump. Every whisper of wind against the windows sounded like him coming to take me again. I wanted to run out there and disappear into his truck, let him drive me anywhere but here, anywhere I didn't have to feel the weight of this life pressing me into the floor. But I stayed frozen, arms pinned to my sides, tears running down my cheeks. I've lived with guilt before, but not like this. Not when it tasted like comfort. Not when it made me feel more alive than I had in years.